There is another point of view, that what he interprets as the results of paleo-contact is in actual fact the legacy of a previous global civilization. Now let's see what does not fit into the cultic historical myth. This here is a page of the magazine Technika Молодежи, number 5 for 1969. At the top of the page is a photograph taken by the American Lunar Orbiter 2 station from an altitude of 50 kilometers. In the picture, objects are casting shadows. In nature, objects with a height-to-diameter ratio greater than 5 are extremely rare. Here there are many of them. They are all concentrated in one place. Some kind of natural anomaly? But then why is the plan for the location of these spires here mirrored in relation to the plan for the placement of the pyramids in Giza? Are the pyramids in Giza also natural anomalies, or were they once imprinted? Our civilization did not build anything on the moon. The authenticity of this image, not NASA, not anyone has denied. It is on the internet. It can be found if you search for Lunar Orbiter 2. Medieval map. It depicts Antarctica without an ice shell. Antarctica was discovered in 1820-21 by a Russian Antarctic expedition led by Bellinghausen and Lazarev. A map from the Middle Ages. Moreover, it is not the only one. Further, if you remember the school course in geography, then with latitude in general, everything is more or less simple. The height of the sun above the horizon allows you to recalculate this matter in the coordinate of the north or south latitude. And how about longitude? And with longitude there are difficulties. The planet rotates, and in general it turns out that if you want to determine the longitude of an area, you must know where the prime meridian is, and you must have some device that stores the time of the prime meridian there where you are. And accordingly, if on the prime meridian sunrise is at a certain time, for you sunrise is at a different time, then you can recalculate taking into account the daily cycle, where you are, on which meridian. These ancient maps have been drawn with such an accuracy that mathematics, cartography and chronometry in our civilization has only allowed since somewhere around the 18th century of our era. Before the 18th century of our era, this accuracy was in principle impossible, because there were no chronometers. As noted in the book about Captain Vrungel, it is very inconvenient to sail with weight clocks, whose weights swing in a storm, and the accuracy, of course, leaves much to be desired. The first chronometers were made in England around the time of the expedition of Cook, and they provided the accuracy needed to produce such maps. This here photograph was taken somewhere in the vicinity of Mount Ararat. The website where it was published reports that during the excavations, fossilized structures of the ship's wooden hull and anchor stones were found. Here is a photo of one of the anchor stones. In ancient times, heavy stones were used as anchors. A hole in the stone for the anchor rope to pass through. And the petrified wooden hull structures are composed of trees that do not have tree rings. If you believe the Bible, then in antediluvian times, on the whole earth, there was an even climate, and there were no reasons for the appearance of annual rings. Further, the question is about the size of the ark. If you look at the Bible, the dimensions of the ark are given there. And it turns out to be comparable in size to a nuclear-powered icebreaker of the Arctica class. It's about 150 meters long, about 30 meters wide, and a rather tall hull. The largest wooden ships built by our civilization look like this. This is the 130-cannon, 3-deck battleship 12 Apostles, a fragment of the map from the painting by Ayvazovsky. Its dimensions. The length is slightly less than 70 meters, that is, half the size of the ark. The width, about 18 meters, also about half the size of the ark, and the hull is also lower than the hull of the ark. That is, when a man of the era of wooden shipbuilding read the Bible and saw the dimensions of the ark, saw the ships of our civilization, he had reason to be surprised. Egypt, watercolor, 1839. The Sphinx is covered with sand almost up to its ears. In the memory of our civilization, most of the time it looked approximately like this. It's located in one of the driest places on the planet. When the sand was cleared from the base, it turned out that the base of the Sphinx had been damaged by water erosion. What is the difference between water and wind erosion? The wind blows along the surface, drives sand, and sand, with all sorts of dust microparticles, knocks out particles from stones. It takes quite a long time, but there remain horizontal traces of destruction, as the wind blows which carries the sand. But water flows from top to bottom. Therefore, water erosion leaves traces more or less vertical or close to vertical. The base of the Sphinx is damaged by water erosion. In order for this damage to occur, it is required that the Sphinx be watered for centuries, if not millennia. But in order for the Sphinx to be watered by showers, it's required that it be in a tropical zone where there are showers. In addition, the obelisks of Egypt were used at one time as sundials. That is, the scales on which they cast shadows have been preserved. And it turns out that the scales are uneven. Morning, noon, and sunset hours have different durations if correlated with our modern clocks. Does anyone need a watch for whichever purpose, in which the morning hours are of one duration, the midday hours of a different duration, and the pre-sunset hours again of a different duration? But if Egypt is displaced 15 degrees south, then it finds itself in a zone watered by tropical showers, and the scales of the sundials again become even. In Egypt, many researchers note the degradation of building technologies, because everything is assembled from large stone blocks, and above this masonry of blocks rises a masonry of small, poorly processed stones, which does not in any way lead to the thought that it was done by the same highly professional builders. Plus, traces of some structural elements remained in the granite, which are now lost, but the accuracy of the surface treatment of which raises doubts that it was done by hand, to say nothing of the question of why it was done. Bosnia. Here there are also pyramids. The pyramids are assembled from concrete blocks. The roads near the pyramid are also made of concrete blocks. The pyramids are covered with a layer of soil about a meter thick, sometimes more. For the formation of a layer of soil of this thickness in the conditions of the Mediterranean, according to soil scientists, from 10 to 15,000 years are required. According to the official version of history, in those days there was no one to build these pyramids. The already mentioned Erich von Daniken wrote the book The Stone Age Was Different. Among other things that he says there, he insists that the sanctuaries of the Stone Age in Europe are not randomly located. Here a tribe is living, something came to their mind, we want a sanctuary. They found the nearest hill, stuck a few stones there, and started making sacrifices. This was not the case. It turns out that all the sanctuaries of the Stone Age, at least the most significant, are located on rays that converge in the Delphi region, where, in ancient times, the Delphic oracle was located. That is, the entire complex of sanctuaries of the Stone Age. This is a project of pan-European scale, which does not correspond to the historical myth that there were ancient tribes who lived with their interests within the horizon. And again, it turns out that many stone tools were not found where the stone was taken for their production. That is, the logistics also carried a trans-European character in some cases. In general, the only version that explains what happened is that somewhere around 13,000 years ago, a global geophysical catastrophe took place. As a result of this catastrophe, the lithosphere turned relative to the core, or the position of the planet relative to the plane of the ecliptic changed. Antarctica left the mild subtropical climate to where it is. Egypt went north. On the territory of modern Yakutia, there were deposits of freshly frozen mammoths and everything else, since the catastrophe was of a fleeting character and the dead animals did not have time to decompose. This is the only version that explains all these anomalies that don't fit into the historical myth. But besides the global catastrophe, to all appearances there were local catastrophes. Therefore there was a worldwide flood, but there were also local catastrophes, which were accompanied by floods and everything else. And some historians are trying to replace these local catastrophes to close the question of a global catastrophe and what was before it on the planet.